Hello. Today we're going to continue talking about the lymphatic system, but today we're going to focus on lymphoid organs. So, does this look familiar to you from the cardiovascular system unit? Hopefully you identify this as leukocytes, or all the different types of white blood cells. And today, specifically, we're going to focus on lymphocytes. So, one specific subcategory of white blood cells. There are two main types of lymphocytes, B cells, this really cute guy right here. B cells make antibodies, and then T cells. T cells are able to attack cells directly, and there's three different kinds of T cells that we're going to talk about in the future. So for today, I would just like you to know that lymphocytes are white blood cells, and there's two types, B cells and T cells. This diagram shows all of the lymphoid organs throughout the body, and they are split into primary and secondary lymphoid organs. Primary lymphoid organs are where the B and the T cells mature, and they include the thymus. The thymus is a gland that secretes hormones, and it's located like right above the heart. And the thymus is where T cells mature. And then anywhere we have red bone marrow in the body, that is where the B cells mature. And then over here, secondary lymphoid organs, after the lymphocytes mature, they actually are going to encounter a pathogen with an antigen and they become activated. And they do that inside of a secondary lymphoid organ. And the secondary organs consist of the tonsils, which you're probably already familiar with, and then other little patches of lymphoid tissue, including the spleen and Pyres patches. Those are basically tonsils in the small intestine and the appendix. And we're going to talk about all of these in more detail in a second. So recap on the difference between primary and secondary organs. The lymphocytes would mature inside of a primary organ and then travel, let's say, to your mouth, and then you're eating a food and it has a pathogen in it. The lymphocyte is going to encounter that pathogen in the secondary organ, and then it's going to become activated and alert the immune system. The spleen. So let's orient ourselves. This is the diaphragm. That's the muscle that helps our lungs be able to inflate. So kind of locate your rib cage, your diaphragm's in there. Your spleen is on the left side, like right underneath your diaphragm, tucked up in there. And it is the largest lymphoid organ. And it's really important to the cardiovascular system because it's in charge of basically breaking down red blood cells. We know that they reproduce very quickly, so we need to have a mechanism in place to be able to get rid of the old ones. I also want to recommend that everybody check out this book, The Blood Hungry Screen, and Other Poems About Our Parts by Alan Wolfe. And maybe this image will help you remember that the spleen removes old red blood cells. This is a throwback to our very first unit in August. Who can identify the tissue type? Hopefully you've narrowed it down to yes, epithelial, but then which kind? Simple, stratified, columnar, cuboidal? Hopefully you came up with pseudostratified, ciliated, columnar, epithelium with goblet cells. So pseudostratified means that it's only one layer of cells, but it looks like two. So like there's this cell right here, but then there's this cell all the way through the top here. So this is really one layer of cells, but it's messy. Ciliated, this is the cilia on the top, the little hairs that are able to move and help circulate things. Columnar means that they're pretty much rectangular shaped. So pseudostratified, ciliated, columnar, epithelium. And then this particular section has goblet cells. Like this white cell right here is a goblet cell that produces mucus. This is another goblet cell. This is another goblet cell. And we have this specific tissue type in all of our openings to the outside. So like think about like your nose or your mouth or your urethra where the pee comes out. Like all of those places that are exposed to the outside need some way of preventing things to get in. And this tissue, this pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelial tissue, forms our mucous membranes or our mucosa that helps keep out the bad things. The mucus is sticky, so you could kind of visualize pathogens getting stuck in the mucus and then the cilia helping to move the pathogens along. There is a name for this, and it is MALT. MALT is an acronym for mucosa associated lymphoid tissues. So basically, we were just talking about that epithelium that forms our mucous membranes. There are some areas that also have lymphoid organs sitting inside of them to kind of form like a double layer of protection. This view over here is of the small intestine. Everything in blue is the small intestine that absorbs nutrients. And then these little green things right here are an example of MALT. So they're basically, this is an area where the B or T cells could come and live here, and then they're checking all of our food in here for pathogens. What I just showed you was called Pyres Patches. So that is the lymphoid tissue that's in the small intestine. You can basically think of it as like tonsils in the small intestine. You're probably familiar with your tonsils in your oral cavity. They are kind of the first checkpoint against food and air. So their function is to be able to find pathogens before they can enter our digestive tract or before they enter our respiratory tract and get to our lungs. If the tonsils don't catch everything and a pathogen does make it down into our intestines, then they'll encounter the Pyres patches. And then finally, we go through the small intestine, we go through the large intestine, right here, the appendix. A lot of people consider this a vestigial organ, and it's not because it actually contains lymphoid tissue. So for any bacteria that's past the tonsils and past the Pyres patches, hopefully the appendix will be able to capture it. And if you can, just picture that pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium in all of these places, holding a little bit of the lymphatic tissue to help guard our body against things trying to get inside. And here is a weird, but I think helpful video that kind of ties the whole thing together. So I recommend you watch this. Thank you.